employment, and leadership roles. By prioritizing inclusive policies, Nigeria can unlock the full potentials of its women, fostering economic growth and social development.
The inauguration of the policy roadmap is an initiative that reflects the Babajide Sanwo-Olu administration's commitment to gender equity and inclusive economic growth.
You're welcome, Your Excellency.
Let's keep clapping. So the policy has set some bold objectives for entrepreneurship.
Women constitute nearly half of Lagos' population and continue to face substantial barriers in skill acquisition, access to finance, and participation in both traditional and emerging industries, including agriculture and technology. This event marks a pivotal step in changing that narrative.
We are no longer asking whether women should be included. We are ensuring that they are equipped, enabled, and elevated.
This roadmap offers a well-defined strategy to address the systemic challenges limiting women's participation in the economy through a rigorous 12-month domestication process enriched by stakeholder dialogue, co-creation workshops, grassroots engagement, and validation exercises.
At the heart of the roadmap are 5 key pillars: agriculture, entrepreneurship, traditional labor markets, emerging industries, education, and skill acquisition. Through these pillars, Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu said the policy seeks to bridge existing gender gaps, strengthen financial inclusion, promote digital and technological equity, and advance women's leadership in critical sectors.
I can see that policy seeks to bridge the existing gender gaps, seeks to strengthen financial inclusion, seeks to promote digital and technological equality, and it is hoped that it will advance women's leadership in critical sectors. We believe that this participatory approach will help to set the context and will help to ensure that women in Lagos continue to have a pride of place.
Over the past year, the Ministry of Women Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, WAPA, has collaborated with MDAs, technical partners, civil society organizations, and the private sector to domesticate the national WE policy in Lagos State,
Private sector WE policy champions are next.
Needs of women
Private
and
sector WE policy
in the
champions.
state. Adedoja Salamadini, TVC News, Lagos.
The technical committee.
Join us from Abuja for this conversation is the Executive Director, Policy Innovation Center, Dr. Osasuyi Dirisu. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us on the program.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So the governor said in that particular report that having a pride of place is a crucial place for women in Lagos, especially in Lagos. What are the key barriers to women's participation in policy making in Nigeria?
And thank you so much. One of the most important barriers to the participation of women in policy making in Nigeria is representation. So for you to participate actively in policy making, you have to be at the table where the conversations are had. You have to ensure that your needs are adequately represented. You have to be able to reflect on what your felt needs are and how your lived experiences can be enhanced by the sort of context and structure of the policy. So the biggest barrier is representation. And quickly, what are the things that impact on representation of women at the table where policy conversations are being had? So if women are not in decision-making spaces, and they are not likely to be represented. If the approach to policy making is top-down, so where we come up with a draft of a document and then we just get people to endorse it, then you're not likely to put women at the center of it. And all the other barriers around gender biases, cultural norms, and some of those limiting mindsets that impact on our capacity to ensure that for every single policy document we put down, we reflect on who needs to be here, who is affected, and whose voices needs to be represented in that whole policy decision-making spectrum.
Okay, thank you for that answer. But how do societal norms and stereotypes impact women's opportunities in policy making?
Very interesting. So, first of all, sometimes there's that conversation when we reflect on policy making that, so for example, if you're in a male-dominated sector, there's that assumption, for example, that, oh, we already know what women need. And there's a poster that I have in a presentation I do around gender-responsive policies. And it's a poster that shows women going to the stream on the left to fetch water, and then men sitting around the table to have conversations about the best way to solve the water problem in the community. So it's first of all debiasing our minds that women have a voice. Women can actually speak and articulate their needs clearly. So sometimes we have those norms that make us feel that, oh, women really don't know what they need. We know what they need, so we can speak for them and represent them better. But when you look at some very critical issues, like, for example, engaging women in economic spaces, addressing some issues around maternal and child health, female genital mutilation, even issues relating to how do you scale digital literacy for women, or how do you ensure that women have bank accounts. These are conversations that affect women directly. But when you have norms, for example, that limit women's access to financial services, that limit women's access to digital tools, then it's unlikely that when conversations are going to be made about including women or how to address issues with women, that will bring women to the decision tables. But most importantly, it's important for us to accept the fact that if you have a committee, for example, that does not have the adequate representation of the groups that will be at the receiving end of the policy or program or project, then we are not likely to represent their voices adequately.
Absolutely. Well, Nigeria is not doing best at its best, especially at the 35% affirmative action, if you agree with me. We've seen some other countries that are doing better than that. So what are the policies do you think we can put in place to ensure women is fully represented at the government level, especially taking leadership positions?
Thank you. So there are different pipelines that we need to consider for ensuring that this can work. So first of all is, now that we know that there's a clear gender gap, so we need to look at, for example, representation at different levels. So policy conversations I know are ongoing, for example, about increasing women's political representation in decision-making spaces in the Senate, in the House of Rep, at local government level, at states and government level. So we have the affirmative action that even is almost like a starting point. So 35% representation. So that is a framework that we can actually, if implemented, you know, as a starting point, can even see us increasing access to women in decision-making spaces. But it doesn't end there. I always like to look through the entire spectrum. So we start from production of women for this decision-making spaces. So we have to improve representation of women in academic spaces. So we're currently working on a project that is looking at women in leadership in economic academic sectors. In some universities that we visited, you have a faculty teaching economics. You have a faculty of 20, 21 people, and then you have 20 academics who are male and 1 female academic. So if tomorrow we are looking at increasing representation of women, for example, in economic political sectors, then there's no production of women. So we have to look at the policies that guide increasing representation in education. So when, for example, we're looking at issues relating to out-of-school children, and we're implementing policies that see girls, more girls, registering, enrolling, and completing school, we're actually working to promote that pipeline that would ensure that 10, 20 years after, we would have competent women who are ready and resourced to take up decision-making spaces. So we're looking at affirmative action, policies that increase access to education, policies that increase representation of women, for example, in different sectors. We see that how that has worked in banking. We can see how that can work at different levels, all the way from local government to national level. In
your last answer, you mentioned education, you mentioned healthcare, you mentioned politics. But But I want to ask, in Nigeria, in today's Nigeria, what sectors do you think need the biggest policy push?
Thank you. So the biggest policy push would start from providing access to economic opportunities. And that's why, for example, over the past week, we've been, we just, in the last few days, the Lagos State government launched the policy roadmap to ensure that the women economic empowerment, the national women economic empowerment policy is domesticated in Lagos State. It's very hard, it's very difficult when you speak to women who are seeking representation at different levels. One of the biggest conversations that we have is even the agency to make decisions. And one way to increase opportunities for that agency is to ensure that women are economically empowered. It's only an economically empowered woman who would, for example, think about making her voice heard, who would send her daughters to school, who would ensure that within her community, she increases her opportunities to have her voice heard, access to healthcare, access to services. Is a woman who is economically empowered that begins to think about owning a bank account, being financially included, taking advantage of digital tools that can open her up to information about the world, what is done. So it really would take that step back to addressing those real critical gaps in economic empowerment of women. And that's why the National Women Economic Empowerment Policy and its domestication across different states is critical. And that's why the step that Lagos State government has taken is very commendable.
Well, Dr. Idrisu, talking about women empowerment, having them participate in some policy making is good. But checking through your profile, I also noticed that you've been speaking against gender-based violence. There's this statistic that says 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence in the country. What do you make of this development to ensure that the lives of women are protected?
Thank you. So across different policies that we already have in the country, including the Women Economic Empowerment Policy, when you look at some of the barriers to women advancing in traditional labor markets, in emerging industries, in the agricultural sector, you would see that one of the big barriers is gender-based disparities as a result of gender-based violence. And so we understand that gender-based violence, apart from being a violation of human rights, limits a woman's capacity to even want to look beyond her immediate environment to contribute meaningfully to society. And so that's why at the core of my work and at the core of our work at the Policy Innovation Center and some of those conversations that we take, the gender-based violence is a conversation that we have at every gender inclusion summit that we have hosted since 2022, because really addressing gaps in gender-based violence is critical for ensuring that women can achieve their full potential. And we have a policy framework from the VAP Act to the Child's Rights Act, and now even in the Women's Economic Empowerment Policy. If these policies are clearly adopted, domesticated, we would make a lot of progress in addressing gender-based disparities that are occurring as a result of violation of the rights of women and gender-based violence.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
we'll continue to push that some of those policies are implemented and ensure that women get that right voice in the country. It's a fine place to leave it this morning. Executive Director, Policy Innovation Center, Dr. Osasoyi Idrisu. Many thanks for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Now, in part 3 of the program, with the rising rate of unemployment in the country, can vocational training bridge the skill gap in the country? Join us for more on this conversation. Do not go anywhere.